have a plan. For you. For all of us.
What kind of world do you want to believe in? Is it a world filled with pain, loss, suffering, or a world filled with joy, love, and hope? Well, this fourth episode shows both sides of the question, as it comes with a very heavy emphasis on believing in humanity and welcoming the world with kindness despite the storms and fears that come with it. I knew that Annie would be a character of importance, but I didn't know that she would come with such a strong and powerful and emotional story. As we say goodbye to a character that I thought was going to stick around a lot longer, but at the same time, we say hello to this same character's future and her legacy. We are back breaking down this fourth episode of Season 2 of Paradise. We see Annie and X get to learn and trust one another as they go on a journey to find their loved ones. Meanwhile, we flash back to a time when Cal's optimism in the future in the bunker leads to Sinatra sharing a secret. With that said, we got a lot to discuss, full spoilers ahead. We open at a camp where we find Link experiencing the shattered mirror that may point to multiple versions of himself in a dream, and we see the same vision that X had, but from Link's perspective. We see Geiner wakes up Sleeping Beauty Link to tell him that the train's still delayed, but Link doesn't care. All he wants to do is find the bunker as he instructs all the survivors within the camp that they are moving out. Now, a couple things I want to point out about this opening scene. First, this is the larger group Link was referring to in episode 1, the one he told Annie about that he was a part of, and it seems that he is the leader based on him telling them that it's time to move out. Now, let's talk about the bad news about this train. What exactly is this train? Does it contain something that will help them break into the bunker if push comes to shove and they're not welcome in voluntarily? Or does it contain something that can kill or shut down Alex? Or will the train be used to transport Alex elsewhere? Or it could be all of the above or something else entirely. Another thing I want to mention, and is more of an observation. The shots of the people within the group look like a mixture that may have been people that served in the military or the Marines, and there were some people that looked to be pretty regular. There were some young people I saw, some middle-aged people, as well as older people as well. But to be honest, I didn't get the vibe that this group of people posed much of a threat. Now, I could be wrong, but I bring this up because after episode 1, I had mentioned if the crew that Annie met with Link were just cool, nice nerds as they call themselves, but maybe the larger group were maybe more aggressive or evil or bad. But again, based on this opening shot that we just talked about, again, they seem to be more or less like Link. Now, let's talk about this dream. Now, we talked about this in my breakdown last week, as well as reading off you all's theories and comments, and I think we're all onto something here. Now, I explained in depth what the advanced wave function superposition and quantum entanglement was in last week's breakdown, but for those that are new, basically the entanglement goes hand in hand with another quantum phenomenon known as superposition, in which particles exist in two different states at the exact same time. Now, we've talked about time travel and quantum physics maybe being an element of this season, but I'm going to go ahead and officially put my bet on this. I believe that at some point in the future, we're going to see both Link and X will come across Alex, and something will probably go wrong. And just like I said about the particles existing in two different places at one time, I think whatever this accident may be in my theory will make where X and Link will be both in the past and the future where we see this dream occurring. Now look, I know we just started this breakdown, so I don't want to drop all this science up top, but we'll probably revisit this towards the end of this breakdown, or I'll bring it back into this week's theory video, which is I'm thinking right now that Alex will allow a person to have effects on the past, present, and future when you're around this device, or if something terribly goes wrong with the device. Now, back at Graceland, we see X wakes up as Annie trusts him and uncuffs him so that he can walk around as he realizes where he is. Now, as Annie cracks a joke about him assuming that she was pregnant, this leads us into this week's flashback to the last time that X saw a woman pregnant, which takes us back to the early days of the bunker. Now, this flashback will also serve as the episode's main themes of resilience and hope and having belief in humanity. 3 years earlier, we see President Cal walks into Sinatra's office, happy to be celebrating the very first woman to have birth in the bunker. 5 months in, Cal just wants to find a reason to cheer up the community and show them that they can build some sense of normalcy underground, as well as having a future and seeing this as hope. Now, Cal wants Sinatra to join them in visiting the mother, but she has other plans for the day, which involve a meeting about the reactors of the bunker, which we know runs the bunker, and she invites him to join instead. It's here that Cal kind of jokingly mentions how the reactors work. It's made up of an aquifer, 3D printers, and the modular nuclear reactors, which was actually mentioned back in episode 3. But this being the first time we've heard of things that actually run the bunker. Now, an aquifer is a body of rock that is completely sedated and the water is in it and all around it. It can be made up of sand, gravel, sandstone, or other rocks that store and transmit water. Now, of course, we know that 3D printers are machines that allow the creation of physical object from a 3D dimensional digital model. And lastly, we have the modular nuclear reactors. These are normally what power nuclear plants with the power capacity up to 300 megawatts per unit, and I want you all to remember that for later. Now, Cal believes that Sinatra doesn't want to join them in a celebration because of her seeing a newborn child will probably make her think of her loss of Dylan, but she insists that it's just because she has a busy day at work. Now, it's interesting to think about how much this season has been about time and how much it has impacted these characters, particularly Sinatra. Now, the past week, the question about who and what is Alex and are we possibly exploring time travel elements was definitely a hot topic of discussion. Now, to add more fuel to that burning question, the idea of Sinatra having the capacity of having a device that can travel back in time to save her son or to simply see him again is not out of the realm of possibility. This idea came up to me after watching the recap at the beginning of each episode. At the beginning of this very episode, they made a point to show us the scene from season 1 where Sam told Gabby in her therapy session that she disagreed with the notion that time heals all, but instead she said that time is making it worse because it's taking her further away from her son who was alive. Again, all these clues seem to point to the evidence that time travel, or at the very least, some kind of connection to time or the manipulation of time, will be a central part of this season's plot. Now, back in present day, we see X continues to let Annie know how important it is that he goes to Atlanta, but after sustaining his injury, which he needed stitches to his spleen, Annie tells him that he won't be going anywhere anytime soon because he's going to need 2 weeks to heal. But once he does, first place they're going to be going is to the bunker, according to Annie. As they briefly discuss what the bunker's like, he lets her know that Atlanta is the first priority as they exchange names. Now, we get a scene that shows us the 2 weeks of time passing by and showing us things like X healing. We see Annie taking care of her horse as well as monitoring her pregnancy. We also see them getting to know each other a little bit more and getting a chance to build trust in one another. Now, we see Annie having a look of concern when checking her blood pressure. Meanwhile, X is reading Mary Shelley's 1826 The Last Man. This being a nice little detail to what's going on in the show, as the book served as a tribute to Shelley's deceased friends, as well as her exploring her own feelings of isolation after her loss. Now, outside over some tea, we see X takes in the fact that he's getting the chance to see the sunset for the first time in years, as he tells Annie he's strong enough to travel now. He knows he owes Annie for saving him, which he ends up doing by the end of this episode, but he also lets her know that saving Terry is first and it's non-negotiable. Now, for the first time, Annie shares with X that the importance of going to the bunker is to find the father of her child, and she also admits that not going the first time when he invited her was because of her fear of leaving and her fear in the world and the people in it. Now, we watch as X comforts Annie about her overwhelming feeling about her fears of the world, as she's also obviously fearful about being a parent for the first time, but he lets her know that ultimately it all comes with endless amount of joys as well. Now, Annie shares with X that she didn't really have trust in people prior to the event, but in the last 2 weeks, it appears that she now trusts X and makes him make a promise to her that after he finds his wife in Atlanta, which she'll be going with him to find her, that he will take her to the bunker, and we watch X makes his promise to do so. As we watch them leave, which means Annie's leaving Graceland for the first time in 3 years as their journey to find the people they love begins. Now, I want to go back to that scene. It's important to look at Annie there because we see that she's starting to cry. I believe this is where she started to think and know that there is a possibility of what could happen to her if her baby arrives, which makes this journey that she's about to go on hit even harder because she didn't want to be alone when giving birth, and she needed to know 100% certain that the person that she's going to be leaving her baby with potentially is a good person, and that of course be an ex. I also want to point out that before leaving, we see Annie's pregnancy log, and we see that look of concern that we saw earlier from her. We see in this log Annie's upper systolic has gone up each day. Her Her readings are high, and I'm no doctor, but I would think that that means that her blood pressure is high as well. Now, a quick Google search told me that when a pregnant woman has high blood pressure, it poses the following risk. Less blood flow to the placenta, and if the placenta doesn't get enough blood, the fetus might receive less oxygen and fewer nutrients. This could lead to slow growth and low birth weight or premature birth. Now, we know that Annie was a med student at one point, and all of this is weighing on her mind as they are about to hit the road. Now, back to the flashback, and we'll focus on this portion for a little bit here, but it's here that we meet the first baby of the bunker and the mother, Louisa. It's always great to see good old Cal and his moments of optimism as he tells Louisa just how special it is that her son will be the first newborn of this new world in the bunker. It was nice to see Cal making time for her and letting her know that he's going to be here for her throughout this entire process. Now, as they wait for the birth in the lobby, we see that fun dynamic of X and Billy and Cal. R.I.P. to the last two. I really miss their banter. But we learn that the baby's heart rate has dropped and they have to perform an emergency C-section as Cal goes with her to help her through this process and X joins along. Now we watch as Cal does his best to keep Louisa calm. Now Cal shares a story about the first time Jeremy was born and how they got into a little fender bender as the doctor told him that babies are built to survive.
Babies are built to survive. They are resilient. They've been found in the rubble of earthquakes 3 days after the fact, alive and well. I promise you, first time that little boy smiles, it's not just going to change you, it's going to change our entire world.
Now you'll notice in this scene, X listening to Cal, what he's saying to Louisa, and we're going to see X use these exact same words years later. Now back with X and Annie, they stop by a nearby church to rest. As they settle in, X sees Link's student ID and recognizes his face from his dreams, or as he calls them, memories that he believes are events that haven't happened yet, and he shares this with Annie. But he leaves out the part about the fact that he's seen Link in those memories. Now, this being the first time a character has referred to this experience as an event that hasn't happened yet. Again, as we discussed earlier, I believe this future memory is caused by both X and Link being near or close by Alex, and something's going to happen where, again, I think they're going to be able to see what's happening in the past and future all at the same time. It's the next morning. As they hit the road, we see they come across a group of people. Now, Annie's concerned and wants X to keep quiet, but he says hello to the group of people and he gets no response from the group of four, which includes a little boy and a woman in the back who shows her gun as they pass each other by. Now, this kind gesture by X will later prove to be very effective for Annie in a bit. Now, we have to remember, someone in X line of work, you have to be an expert at reading people. As a Secret Service agent, you gotta know if someone poses a threat or if they're not a threat. And this brief interaction told X all he needed to know about these people for later. Now, you might be saying to yourself, where are those great skills from X when it comes to Jane? And the fact that he hasn't been able to see through her BS, well, that's another story for another day, and let's just say that Jane seems to be a master at deception and manipulation. Now, X notices that Annie is feeling some discomfort as they make another stop at a diner that used to serve waffles, which, funny enough, Annie said earlier in the episode that she actually was craving some. Little would she know this would be the place that she would have to make the toughest decision of her life. Now inside, we see these two developing their relationship more as we see X showing Annie how he used to swaddle his babies as they talk about the experience of being a first-time parent. Now Annie tells X about a time that she witnessed this gigantic tornado that had lightning inside of it about 6 months ago, and she saw this as like a bad sign, a bad omen of the world in which her baby would be born into, a world of destruction, pain, loss, and death, and storms will be coming. My X assures her that joy will come as well. Despite the storms coming, believing in people and remembering everyone is capable of a great change and a great love and promise, it's a holy charge. Now, X thinks he's teaching her something here, but in reality, this is just showing Annie that X is more than capable of taking care of her baby. All these little moments and these stories and life lessons that he's been sharing throughout this episode so far, in my opinion, are all proof for Annie that X will be a good caretaker for her baby if something were to happen to her, and it will help the baby, he will help the baby navigate through this world that she feared. Now, as they hit the road again, Annie begins to feel pain. Annie confesses that she has been experiencing preeclampsia, which is a high blood pressure disorder that typically develops after 20 weeks into pregnancy. It can present serious risks to both the mother and the child. Now, Annie was afraid to tell X of her condition because she knew that he probably wasn't going to take her on the road, but obviously it's too late for that, as he will have to help her deliver her baby. Now, again, it's important to point out that Annie knew that it wouldn't be a good idea for her to stay back in Graceland, and she knew that X wouldn't be staying in Graceland because he had to save his wife, so she made the decision to leave, knowing that she would need him at some point. Now, X begins looking around the diner for supplies that can help during the pregnancy, but he's not having any luck. He ultimately decides that he'll have to get help and supplies from the people they pass on the road, despite Annie begging him not to go. It is time to trust in others as Annie finds herself alone yet again, and she has to put faith in X in hopes that these strangers will show some kindness and show holy charge. As Xavier runs past their do not trespass sign and arrives at the stranger's front door, he announces himself unarmed and needs help, but no one answers as he enters their home. No one appears to be home inside, so we see X takes it upon himself to take some supplies that can help, but in comes one of the strangers with his gun drawn. Now, X quickly takes out this individual and he apologizes while doing so, and in comes this person's father with a shotgun pointing at X's head as X is currently standing over his son who he just attacked. Now, we don't get to see how X ended up getting out of this situation, but man, I would have loved to have seen that. Hopefully it's in the deleted scenes. Now, back at the diner, we see Annie knows what the outcome of her pregnancy will be as she starts to write a letter for her unborn child. Now, in comes the father who we last saw holding a gun to X's head, and Annie's afraid, but behind him comes others and X here to help. Now, as hard as it can be, and it won't always work, but having belief in people can sometimes prove to be helpful. Now, it's a struggle, but with the necessary equipment and the people there to help, we see Annie gives birth to her daughter. Now, this is cut between Louisa, who's also having her child as well, as we see Sinatra arrives and we see her crying outside watching, thinking about the loss of her son, but also the future of this newborn child coming into this world that she wants to bring back. Now, we see that Annie just had a girl, so the theory that I thought was very interesting, but the theory out there that we talked about in my breakdown last week was some people theorized that maybe Link would end up being Annie's baby, which I wasn't the biggest fan of, just the idea of Link having sex with his mom and him being the baby, but thank goodness we can put that theory to rest. Now, unfortunately, we can also put another theory to rest, as some people thought that maybe Link and Annie were going to be the younger versions who turned out to be the developer and the wife that we met last week by the name of Alex, but like I mentioned, unfortunately, that won't be happening. Now, Annie holds her daughter and experiences the moment of life at full volume, that being what X called what his father would say, which he described as things being in high definition, being fully present, knowing that your baby is safe and made it to the world. Now, Annie knows that her baby made it into this world safely and will be safe with X, but unfortunately, this moment doesn't last long. We watch as Annie starts feeling pain as her placenta doesn't come out and is causing her to bleed. We see Annie yelling at the people to stop who's helping her in a moment as she's accepted what she already knew. Annie hands X the letter that she wrote for her daughter and tells her to let her read it when she's old enough. Annie tells X to find Link and to not let her daughter grow up to be afraid of people like she was, and she leaves him with this holy charge. This whole moment just makes me think about the conversation between the developer and Billy in episode 3. Are things random or are they meant to be? Think about it. Out of all the places X could have crashed, he crashed close enough for Annie to find him. She just so happened to be a kind person and a person with a medical background to save his life. She also just so happened to be a fan of Elvis, just like his wife. She also happened to have fallen in love and got pregnant by someone who happens to be going to the bunker. If Annie never found X, who knows what would have happened to her and her baby? Are you all starting to get what I'm getting at here? This season has shown that things are not just random. They seem to be things that are meant to happen. Now, is this because of the science fiction elements that we seem to be getting this season and Alex has a role in all of this? Or is someone from the future moving these puzzle pieces to affect the past? Now, let's take a break for a second and get real, raw, and honest. I have no problem admitting this, but man, the waterworks were in full effect during Annie's death. I know some people hated episode 1 because they didn't care for Annie and her backstory and they didn't really have any feelings towards her, but for me, I was the complete opposite. I loved episode 1. I fell in love with Annie, and again, seeing her death just hit like a bag of bricks. It just hit me all at once just thinking about how beautiful her story was all in that first episode and how important that episode was, getting her backstory as a kid and her being an adult and meeting Gail and surviving those 2 years alone and meeting Link, and it all leads to her death. And another reason why this hit me kind of hard is the performances. I mean, both Shailene and Sterling K. Brown and the music playing in the background all amplified the emotions in this moment. As Annie looks at her daughter and says that she isn't afraid anymore, and she slowly dies in X's arms. Damn you, Dan Fogelman. I sometimes forget that he did This Is Us, which I haven't seen like a full season. I've seen episodes, and I've also saw like the movie that he did a couple years ago. But man, Dan, damn you, man. He did the same thing to us last year in episode 4 when he killed Billy. But I don't know, man. I think this one hits a little bit harder because of the stakes and her having a kid and everything that we saw from her background. Like, again, I love you, Dan. Damn you. Again, I just can't help but to think about Annie losing her mom and Gail and Link leaving her, and now she dies. I'm here thinking that Annie's about to be like a series regular. I'm going to be a fan favorite, which she is a favorite of mine, but unfortunately she didn't get to see it all the way through. But as we know, characters that die aren't completely gone. We may see Annie in flashbacks potentially, or maybe if there is some time travel elements about this season, maybe someone will go back in the past and bring her back. But again, that might not happen. Either way, if this is the last time that we saw Annie Clay, again, Shailene Woodley gave a phenomenal performance bringing this character to life. I hope those that hated episode 1 feel bad now, but no, in all seriousness, what a great job. R.I.P. to Annie Clay, who lived in fear but died in joy and hope for the future of her daughter. Now, with the help of Gordon and Tony, who X got into it with earlier, we watch as they bury Annie's body in their front yard with her tombstone saying daughter, mother, and friend. As X holds Annie's daughter and now responsible for her and her well-being, but also keeping his promise to his kids, and that's finding their mother. We see some time has passed by and the family helps make supplies for the baby and X on the road as we see Annie's horse refuses to leave her grave. X speaks with the wife who offers to take in the baby, but X has a promise to keep to Annie, and that's finding her father despite the difficult road ahead of them. Now, X recites the exact same thing Kyle said to Louisa about babies being resilient. Whether it's Billy hearing from the developer about not having bars where he comes from, and then years later X saying the same thing, Sinatra reusing Billy's kill code of having a breath mint to Jane years later, and now X reusing what Cal said all those years ago to Louisa. Does it have anything to do with the past and the present colliding, or is it just a matter of the show just doing something really nice, which is a character learned something that meant something to them at a certain point in their life, and we see them using it years later in present time? Now, X thinks about Annie's experience with the storms as the wife shares a story about the real-world event of Toba supervolcanoes. Point of her story being that time keeps moving forward no matter what gets in front of it, and people still find a way to survive against all odds. Now, as we come to a close of this episode, we watch as X, now with the means of carrying the baby, as they go on their journey. As we see the baby crying, we see Annie's horse, who didn't move from her grave since she passed away and hasn't listened to X, but the horse walks over to X and the crying baby, and he sniffs both of them, realizing that this is someone that meant something to Annie, as the horse now has full trust in X. As we watch them leave the farm on Annie's horse with the baby, they're headed to Atlanta. Now, I don't know if you guys caught this, but they didn't give the baby a name, which makes me wonder if X is going to give the baby the name of Annie, or is he going to wait till he meets up with Link and Link's going to give the child its name. Now, our final moments of the episode takes us back to the flashback where we see Sinatra plays Louisa a visit, and she's brought a gift for her newborn son, and she congratulates her. Now, she ended up naming her baby Calvin, which I'm assuming she named after the president, Cal. Now, Louisa hasn't been able to get much sleep lately, as Sinatra agrees to look over her child for a little bit while she gets some rest, and this being the first time that she's been able to hold a child since losing her son, Dylan. Now look, the show has obviously positioned Sinatra as the big bad of the show, but since day one, I've never really looked at her in that way. I've just seen her as a very morally complex gray character. Now yes, obviously, she's not a great person. We know that she's had people killed in the past. Obviously, we know what she did with the developer in episode 3, what she did with the explorers, but again, she thought that she was doing it for the greater good. Thinking about those explorers that she had Billy killed, her mind was she didn't want them coming back to cause panic in the bunker. Obviously, killing the developer was to use his tech to save the world. Now, by no means am I condoning her actions, but again, I see her as the quote-unquote villain of the show, but at the same time, a good villain, a great villain. They are the ones that think they are the heroes of their own story. They're not all bad, they're certainly not all good, but there's someone that does what they believe is the right thing. Now, we've seen moments of vulnerability and kindness from Sinatra, and this being one of them here. We see Sinatra holding Calvin, and she tells him a secret. We see Sinatra telling Calvin that someday he'll be able to see real stars in the real sky and feel the real warmth from the sun. She swears that she has a plan, and she assures that it's not just for little Calvin, but for everyone in the bunker. Now, I'm assuming she's obviously referring to Alex. Remember the flashback? Earlier in the day, Sinatra had a meeting about the reactor that powers the bunker with the help of all the devices that we talked about. Now we know eventually she's going to be taking power from that device to power up Alex. So I do wonder what happened in that meeting that led her to saying that to Calvin later in the day. Now her making that promise to Calvin makes me think, did she see into the future with the help of Alex? Does Sinatra know what the future holds? Now back with X and little Annie's daughter, we see X reading the letter that she wrote for her daughter about trusting that there are good people in this world. Now this is cut between Link and the group arriving at the front doors of the bunker. Now in Annie's letter, there's a line in which she mentions, and I hate to sound like a broken record, but she mentions how love travels across death and time. Again, will time travel play a factor in this season? Now, as Link walks to the door holding cards for the camera to read, as it says knock knock and apologizing for love actually in them. He wants to speak to their leader and he's asking nicely, but not for long. You know, it's funny to think about that he mentioned Love Actually, but he didn't know a single song from Elvis, he didn't know who Sleeping Beauty was, or Jaws. Which leads me to believe that someone else probably wrote out those cards. Now we know that President Baines is dead and Sinatra's power is kind of in limbo, so my question is, who's in charge of the bunker and who's going to make this call to let Link in or not? Now I'm pretty sure that Sinatra will ultimately make the decision, but this also makes me think about this. This whole time, we're assuming that the bunker plot and X getting to Terry is taking place at the same time, but what if it isn't? What if Link arrived at the bunker days after leaving Graceland? What if X has already returned? We don't really truly know the exact timeline of when these events are taking place. Now, I'm going to throw a little curveball at you all. What if we're watching two completely different unrelated timelines occurring at the exact same time? Now, our last scene has X arriving to Atlanta and him and a baby make it to where Terry was last heard from the message he sent out from the radio transmission coming from the city. As a man steps outside, already knowing who X is, claiming that he's a friend of Terry's. He tells X that in the last 3 years, Terry has been his best friend, has been his partner, and his closest thing that he's had to his sister. But unfortunately, she's been taken from him. Now, you all will notice that he spoke about Terry in present tense, using words like she is his favorite person left in the world. And also, when people say taken away from me, that could imply that they died, or, which I think is the case in this scenario, they've been literally taken by someone, by an individual or a group of people, so she was literally taken away. She's not dead. Also, he did say that she was his partner. Now, I'm assuming him saying that she was like a sister to him implies that they weren't romantically involved. But putting that aside for a second, the question is, where is she and who took her? Could it be Sinatra, this being her leverage against Xavier? Could Sinatra have sent someone out to get Terry, most likely Jane, or could it be someone else entirely? Man, we have a lot to discuss for this week's theory video, so please sound off in the comments right now. And what I like to do with these theory videos that I make once a week, a couple days after the episode premieres, I like to pick out like 5 or 6, maybe 10 questions that you all have as far as predictions and theories, and I share them in a video. So again, let's talk about everything that transpired in this episode in the comments below. Now look, as we wrap up, I'm always open to discussing how you all feel after each episode, but I'm gonna tell y'all right now, if I see someone in the comments talking about, oh, this episode sucked, it was boring, nothing happened, whatever the case may be, I'm going to need you all to not watch this show anymore, because to me, this was peak cinema, as the kids would say. I'm obviously kidding. I obviously want to hear you all's opinion, whether you loved or didn't like this episode or whatnot, but to me, I felt this episode was incredible. I know we love the fast-paced stuff going on, bouncing from character to character, the stuff going on in the bunker, crazy reveals, but look, last week we got that, but I have really enjoyed, what I love about this show is, from day one, if I'm being honest, is how the show is so character-driven first, and the twists and turns come after. You have to care about these characters in order to make those crazy moments land. And while short-lived, I found Annie to have such a beautiful arc from episode 1 until now. Again, we got to see her as a kid/teenager, to her being a young adult, to her giving birth to her baby, and ultimately her death. Within that story, we got to see her experiencing loss, her fears, her pain, and her grieving. But within that experience, just like life, we saw her having moments of joy, hope, resilience, and showing strength. Again, what a beautiful story, and I can't stress enough what a beautiful performance by Shailene Woodley. Now, I also want to talk about how incredible Sterling K. Brown is as such a caring and sharing actor. It could be so easy for him to be in every single frame of this show after the major success after season 1, but he knows in order to have a great show, you need to have great supporting characters that surround the story, and you have to care for these characters. And for him to be able to share that with the supporting cast, this shows you how great of a lead he is. And while doing that, he still delivers an A+ performance in playing Xavier. Overall, I just feel like this was a beautiful, heartbreaking, and heartfelt episode. Funny enough, like I mentioned earlier, last season, episode 4, we had to say goodbye to another character, which is Billy, which I'm not trying to compare the two, but let me know in the comments now, which one wrecked you more emotionally? Was it this season's episode 4 or last season? With all that being said, that will conclude my breakdown of episode 4 of season 2 of Paradise. Now, if you all have made it to this point in the breakdown, I thank you so much for the support. Do me a favor, put in the comments right now, #RIP Annie. Now, if you all enjoyed yourself and enjoyed this week's breakdown, do me a favor, if you're on YouTube, hit the like button, hit the hype button, but also consider sharing this video to anyone and everyone you know that loves talking about this show. Also, leave all your thoughts and theories in the comments below so we can add that in this week's theory video. But also, if you enjoy yourself, if you like what was going on over here and you enjoy the vibes, consider sticking around by subscribing to the channel today. Now, for my podcast listeners out there, I appreciate the support. Whether you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple, please share your thoughts about this episode in the comments below, but also consider following the podcast and leaving me a 5-star review. Alrighty, y'all, what an emotional episode, but a great one at the same time. Thank you all for the support. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you soon with this week's theory video coming out in a couple days. In the meantime, you all remember you are awesome, stay safe, and I'll see you all soon.